Nevena, I am so thrilled to welcome you today to the Divine Union podcast.
Thank you so much, sister. I could not be more excited to be here.
Yes, yes, I cannot wait to dig into this deep and transformative topic with you today. And let's just dive in. I would love to have you share with us all how you got into this work with the sacred masculine and healing of the lineage and alchemizing the shadows. I'd love to hear a bit more about your journey.
Yeah, so it was in 2022 that or 2021 that I really came out of probably the fourth long-term, very, very challenging relationship with the masculine. And I was just going through a breakup and I was really on my knees. And when I say on my knees, I was questioning everything. Why had I been having so many arguments with my boyfriends? Why did I feel so unloved? Why did I feel the need to stray in every single relationship? Why was the communication so broken? And, after the fourth relationship, you start to think, okay, I think this might be me. I think that I might actually be the freaking problem. And that is when I started to think about my relationship with my father. And I started to look at all my male relationships and I just started to put together the puzzle pieces. I started to notice that every single wound that I still had with my father is exactly what was playing out in my romantic partnerships. And so that is really what woke me up to the fact that I have a father wound. And then I thought about the relationship that I had witnessed between my mother and my father growing up, between my grandparents. And there were so many similarities in the patterns that there was no way that I couldn't see it any longer. And so I started to dig. I started to dig and I started to ask the questions. Why did I feel unloved? Why do I still feel unloved? What are all the ways in which I wish my father would have seen me and acknowledged me? And it was interesting because during this period of time, I simultaneously started to go through a lot of arguments with my father. And so there were so many triggers surfacing. And because I was on my knees, because I was going through a breakup, because I said to God, source, the universe, that I'm just ready for this change, I essentially made a commitment that I wasn't going to play out the same patterns. And so there was this one day in the midst of this heated argument with my dad. I look him in the eye and I just say, please forgive me. Please forgive me. And it was a break in the pattern. It was the first time that my father heard words like that come out of my mouth. And I'm getting a little emotional. My dad just turned into a puddle. He had tears in his eyes and our relationship completely changed from that day forward after I asked him to forgive me. He told me how much he loves me. He said, of course, I forgive you. And from there on, in my relationship with my dad, I started to feel seen. I started to feel appreciated. I started to feel protected. And so that is how I got into the work, by just really walking my own journey of coming home and healing my own father wound and feeling the ripples that it made in my relationship, not just with my dad, but with all men.
This is so powerful, Nevena, because this is like what I'm hearing is it's this radical accountability of your life, not holding anything against him, like using this relationship as this mirror. And so I'm so curious to hear from you for everyone listening, yeah, who's maybe in this tense dynamics with their partners or the same relationship patterns playing over and over again. What is this shift for you? Like when you go to this space of forgive me, first, like what do you feel prior to that towards your father, towards the masculine? And then when you have this shift, what comes? Like what drives that forgive me so that everyone listening can really like understand the shift for you and see how they can access this because this is healing.
Well, prior to that, in my relationship with the masculine, I felt a lot of anger. I felt a lot of pain. And so also was blaming a lot. And so what I really started to realize is that because I was holding on to that pain and that anger that I didn't resolve towards my father, every single relationship with the masculine that I was getting into, I was projecting that pain onto them. I could have had the most incredible partner in front of me, a good communicator, a man who was willing to serve, provide, protect, and I was still picking him apart and noticing all the ways in which he wasn't showing up. And then slamming that in his face and holding that up to him and asking him to essentially like justify why he doesn't love me. And that was resulting in so many communication breakdowns. And so when I got out of all these relationships and I had the space to be alone, I asked myself, where does this come from? Where does this anger come from? And I started to think about my childhood and the ways that I felt and everything that I had yet to acknowledge within myself. Perhaps the times that my dad unknowingly didn't show up for me the way that I would have wanted to be held in an argument or a conversation. And so I got to this point of realizing I can't hold this against my father anymore because if I don't resolve this, I will keep punishing men and I will keep making my own life a living hell and my relationships a living hell because they were a living hell. The communication, the arguments, the never feeling like I was seen, like I was able to get my point across because I was so volatile about it, because I was hurting so bad. And I just wanted to shift that. And so, because I made a commitment to heal so that I could be happy and experience love, I made a commitment to stop punishing my dad. And it didn't happen overnight. I had to acknowledge my own emotions, but I somehow knew deep in my bones that the first step was to ask my father to forgive me. And from there, him and I entered into this couple of years of repair where we sat in front of each other and we said, this is how I felt in this situation, and acknowledged one another and our feelings, and then both continued to just forgive each other over and over again.
I'm still like letting this land and simmer because it's so fascinating to me that you came at it like, forgive me, forgive me. I see my own patterns. And I feel it's resonant for so many women, this dynamic, and my own journey included, of not feeling seen by the masculine, not feeling held by the masculine, and then resenting the masculine as a result, and then resenting all of the masculine partners as a result of, you can't hold me, you can't see me, you can't provide safety for me, you're not there for me in the way I need. And how do we? And it's so interesting. The reason I'm simmering. I think it's so interesting that you asked him to forgive you, because for me it was like, oh, I forgive you. But that's an interesting um, approach. But regardless, the bridge, is like, how do we forgive? How do we, like, they're not perfect human beings, and just letting it be that without having to blame or shame, because that doesn't help anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
tell me, then, when with your relating, like, how did this shift? How did this shift when you think of longer term, the effects of this? You're working with your dad. Tell me more about this time with your father as you're working through healing. And then how does that impact relating moving forward, expectations and partnership?
Yeah, so, the journey very much started with my dad, but then I actually ended up moving away from home. And so my father wasn't very present for the rest of that healing. I had kind of initiated it with him. And so I'm going to bring this in. It's like I initiated that process, and what actually started to happen is I started to call in very emotionally avoidant men, one after the other into my life. And I essentially started to feel the pain of emotional avoidance. And at first, I was so fixated on like, they're wrong, I'm mad, I'm upset, I'm not being seen. And I didn't loop in that for too long because I had already had the experience of doing that with my father and understanding that that wasn't the way. And so
Yeah.
after this series of emotionally avoidant partners, what I really did is I looked at myself in the mirror and I just said, okay, what is the frequency in you? Where's
Mm.
your responsibility in calling this in? And I actually started to unpack my own emotional avoidance, my own closed heart, which brought me to even deeper layers of healing my father wound. Because in that, I figured out that I still had so much unresolved, karma and emotional baggage toward the masculine. And what I really started to do during that period is I started to practice a lot of holotropic breath work. And so I was having these enormous physical and emotional releases, and I would just lay in my bed and cry and grieve. I really grieved my relationship with my dad. I grieved the heartbreak that I experienced as a child. And it was after moving through feeling that heartbreak that I really let go. I just, I let go. I let go of the resentment, the hurt, because I finally fully processed it.
I think this is so powerful what you're speaking to about. I love this mirroring of I see now my own emotional avoidance that's attracting this. And this mirrors for me also my experience with my father is I had this moment where I became a hyper masculine figure. And I realized that all my resentment towards the masculine, frustration towards the masculine for energy that I was disgusted by, dominating energy, penetrating energy, that I also have those wounded masculine parts inside me. And so for me, that also transformed my fear towards the masculine as well. Because it's like, I am you, you are me. I have this within me. Therefore, I have compassion because I understand you. Because it's like you're saying, I can go there. I can be aggressive. I can take pleasure in dominating. I can be emotionally avoidant as well, right? And it's like it's acknowledging these things and also acknowledging like the systemic conditioning that also impacts the genders and that we're all a product of the system and that we're all just doing the best that we can and mirrors, we're all the same. And it's so deeply healing when we can take ownership of that and also see our part in that and understand each other because we're all human beings, no matter man, woman, gender, non-conforming individual, avoidant or not. We all have these tendencies within us in different levels.
100%. And so, one of my biggest fears was the emotionally avoidant man. And I would get super anxious. And the moment that I realized that his emotional avoidance was actually mirroring my own emotional avoidance and my own closed heart, that actually gave me my power back. And it doesn't mean that I didn't still have, for example, like the physical response when a man is pulling away. I would still feel the anxiety, but it placed it in context, and I knew exactly what I needed to work on within myself. I knew that I had deeper layers to go through, to go to, of processing my own emotions, of grieving, and of continuing to open my own heart regardless of what the other person was doing. And I think one of the biggest commitments that shifted my life, and it started that moment that I said, Father, please forgive me, was the choice to open my heart regardless of what the other person was going to choose, right? Because there is this vulnerability in that we're only willing to open our heart if we have a guarantee that the other person is going to open theirs. And then we get into this dance, right, where nobody actually wins. And when you choose to just open your heart regardless, because you feel the energy of love and you've chosen to heal separation within yourself, you suddenly become very resilient, and you also become resilient to the choices that others are going to make. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I healed and I never attracted an emotionally avoidant man again, There's been many of them that have crossed my path, but the truth now is that I can stay in my power and I can release them with love and let them walk their own path back home to themselves. I don't feel responsible for that anymore. And so I'm just going to lead into this quickly. Something that was very much playing out with men when I was still super unhealed is I was over mothering them. I was trying to control their choices and what they're doing and their healing path. And if they were going to open up, right? It was a coping mechanism because I wanted to compensate for my own fear of not being loved.
Mhm. I'm going to let that land for a moment. Yeah, for everyone listening, because that is so powerful. This dynamic, what I'm hearing, and I'm going to repeat, and it resonates from my life as well and my work, right? It's this mothering, and we go into this mothering to control. So we don't have to feel our own pain of not being loved or our own pain of what if they don't respond in the way that they desire? And then what am I going to make it mean? And how am I going to let it impact my worth as a woman, as a feminine being, as a sensual being? And I want to go there. Let's go deep. Yeah, I would hear what you have to say. I'm curious what you have to say, Nevena, and I'll share my own experience of like how these mirrors, like what happens when inside of us, what has happened inside of you when you get this mirror of like you get someone who's not showing up in the ways that you desire, and like how does it affect you emotionally, and how do you alchemize that, right? Because we're talking here about the learnings from that, the learnings of how do we overcome, because everyone listening here has had been rejected, is dealing with challenges in partnership, is dealing with things not going their way, and how do they overcome and come into this sovereignty in this space of I'm not going to try to control you, but I'm going to speak from my heart and express from my heart, and that's all I can do.
Yeah, so this is honestly my area of expertise through lived experience. When that human shows up in your life, that sacred, sacred mirror who rejects you or who pulls away from you, usually the immediate response is you're going to start to question your own worthiness. You're going to start to have anxiety about whether you're good enough, whether you're lovable enough, whether you are worthy, right? Worth love, whether you actually receive all of those things. And then because we have these wounds, the ego starts to go into compensation mode, right? And it wants to attach meaning to that other person's behavior. And then in many cases, you go into chasing them, right? Because you want to prove that it's not true, that you actually are worthy, that you
Mhm.
actually are lovable. And you do that through chasing the external source for validation. My greatest healing came when I learned that no matter what the other human being does, and no matter what it brings up in me, I can sit with it in spaciousness. I can sit with it in the silence. I can let the stories come to the surface. I can hear my own thoughts. I can witness my own wounds. I can even feel my own bodily response of the anxiety and sometimes even the sheer terror, right? Because it feels like abandonment. It feels like the loss of love. It feels like the deepest, deepest pain.
Yes.
But
Yes. Keep going.
But if you can just learn to hold that, to hold what is coming up in you in spaciousness, in silence, without trying to manipulate the actions of the other person, you will heal. You will learn so much about yourself. You will come into sacred union within yourself because you will come home to the knowing that you don't need to earn love. You are love.
I feel the love in your words, in the way that you deliver your words. And this is such a just such a great topic to be discussing because, yes, we all know it. I know it. When my last lover left me and he wanted to relate with somebody else, I'm going to get vulnerable on this podcast for a moment. I'm going to say it made me question my worth. It made me question like the work that I do with passion and polarity and intimacy. And wow, I can't even keep my own lover around right now. Yeah. And it's so interesting because how it impacts us and it impacts our sense of validation and identity. And this is so interesting because for me, the mirror is, and it's taken me time to get to this mirror, of course, working through the grief and all the feels, but it's like the grief and then the anger and all the feels. But it's this mirror of like God humbling my ego and like reminding me, like, it's okay. I don't need to, my identity isn't tied to that. And who I be, my heart is so much deeper than that, and reminding myself, because also for me it activates that anxious attachment that I also rewired coming out of a traumatic relationship that sparked this whole journey. But it triggers that anxious that's like, oh no, don't leave me, like prove to me that I'm enough, love me, come back, yeah, validate me, validate my work. And it was just this experience of like dissolving the ego and just, no, come back to wholeness, come back to wholeness. And I resonate so much with what you're sharing because we forget our wholeness. It's this feeling, it's this human experience of this whole, this lack. And it always continues to come. And we forget that, like, we try to fill it with work, with shopping, insert whatever addiction, with sex, with partner. I'm going to use my partner to validate me on social media. I'm a relationship coach. So many people do that. But how do we just remember that it's all here? I'm loving this conversation so much.
Wow. I'm really letting what you just shared land.
Mm,
And there's a
I-
truth that wants to come through me as well.
yeah.
And it is that sometimes when a lover or a man, a romantic partner comes into your field, you feel the rightness of them. You feel how perfect they are for the moment. But the ego attaches the expectation that they're perfect because they're gonna bow down to you and adore you and be there and be your life partner, right? And so when that person ends up pulling away or leaving, whether it be for a season or forever, you tell the story of shame and that you're wrong and that it all went to shit and that it wasn't supposed to play out that way. But the truth is that that person gave you exactly what they were supposed to. Perhaps they came into your life to initiate you into your deeper power, to initiate you back into the deepest love for yourself, right? And so every single partner I've had, I see them as coming into my life to give me exactly what I needed. They gave me the medicine. They were my medicine man, right? Because they initiated me back into the deeper truth. And my deepest truth is that we are all one and we are all love. That sacred union is the only thing that's real. And that separation is just a construct created by our egoic mind, right? That just because someone came in, you guys had an incredible time, and then they left, it doesn't actually mean that what they did was wrong. Maybe that's exactly what you needed for that moment in that season of your own soul's evolution.
Yes. This is making me think of, I'm like, I want to go gene keys with you for a moment and just, I'm so curious. Yeah, because I've been simmering on this a lot, Nevena, because I'm going through the gene keys and this program, and I'm doing the one about it's your relationships. And Richard Raw talks about in this path that the certain relationships that are so crunchy in our lives, they continue to come and to come and to come. And we keep being humbled by the same lesson, the same lesson. What is it? What is it? And I always wonder if all humans feel the same because I'm simmering on my own. And I'd be curious your thoughts with yours. But like for me, the same lesson is around it's coming back to the self, not needing the validation and coming back to the wholeness within. And that's the mirror I keep getting in anything, any form of rejection, any form of abandonment, any form of disrespect. Because for me, another wound that always comes up given my childhood is being disrespected, feeling disrespected. But it always comes back to like me owning my wholeness and not needing the validation and like trusting in who I be. And I'm curious, yeah, if that's for you, what your mirror is. I wanted to ask people for so long, like, is this the story that everyone continues to come back to? Or is it something different for you?
That's exactly what my mirror has been. And I think that the other mirror that I've had in my relationships, which ties back to my own father wound, is being proud of my intuitive gifts, my femininity, my soul's gifts, my intuitive power, right? Because that's something that I felt very, very rejected for as a child. I was very much the black sheep of my family, very much made wrong for being so emotionally attuned and sensitive. And so when I started to heal, I started to show my partners my spiritual side and to show them how intuitive I am. And so, every time perhaps someone pulled away or I got rejected, that was always something that came up for me. It's like, was that part of me too much, right? So that's everything you said resonates, but I've just added in like an extra little soul lesson that I feel is a bit nuanced from yours.
I love this nuance. Actually, I'm excited to go down this nuance thread because this relates to me. When I was a kid, uh, I'm the most sensitive one in my familial dynamic. And so I took on the empathy for everybody. Yeah. And so I always thought I was too much, too sensitive. And so for me, it played out in my relationships like I became a self-fulfilling prophecy of hypersensitive in a way where I was needy. But now it's how to alchemize that for like noticing energetic shifts. Like I'm grateful because now I'm hyper aware. Oh, I can notice, partner, you're something's up with the energy. Like what shifted? How are you feeling? And it's owning that sensitivity instead of shying away from it. But I can relate in that, and I think many women listening, or even men listening. I don't want to just single out the women. Depends on your childhood, but you might be like, yes, I feel super sensitive, or I notice these energetic shifts, but someone tells me nothing's actually there, or I'm not feeling what I think I'm feeling. And if you feel something, I want to invite you, and I'm sure Nevena will also have something to share on this, to feel it and to listen to it and to tune in, to not feel shame for it. And I'll also say, I'm still a deeply sensitive person in that you're close in my life, Nevena. So you know, all my close sisters know I'm a sensitive being. So when things hurt my feelings, which happens, like I share it. And I might be affected by something more than someone else might. And letting me own that part of myself without having to demand everyone meet my needs in this way and I'm right and wrong, but it's just from my heart. Like, ooh, this hurt me.
Yeah. I hear you on such a soul level on that. And I had a really, really beautiful relationship come into my life that didn't end up lasting, but actually what that human gave me was such a deep gift because for the first time in my life, I chose to be truly vulnerable and 100% authentic to my emotions. If I felt like crying, I would cry. If I felt sad, I would share that. And some of my previous partners used to look at me and ask me, "Why are you like a rock? Do you feel anything? Do you have a heart?" And it's because I had just suppressed that part of me so deeply because I was so, so afraid of being rejected and abandoned for my emotions. And so I started to own my emotions and just say, I'm cracked open. I have a really big heart and I'm extremely sensitive and I'm going to show it. And the last man that I was with, he would sit there and he would hold such energetic space and just receive that part of me. And in fact, it made him like me even more because he could just see the truth of me, of all of me, right? And so, yeah, that was just a really, really beautiful gift that I received that I'm just so, so grateful for.
I love this embodiment of your feminine and that you're demonstrating for everyone listening, Nevena, because this is like the magnetism of the feminine. Like the masculine wants to see this. They want to see a woman who cries one moment and laughs the next and is feisty one moment, and it's the differences. And this is why I love the work that you do and the work that I do of working also with the masculine healing of the energies is because when we're healed in the masculine, a woman who's in her Shakti and all of her expression is is magnetic because she's not saying you have to meet my needs. Like I'm going to cry. I'm crying because of you. I'm angry because of you. You're not doing this. But it's a woman who's I'm crying because I feel sad and maybe something you did hurt me, but I'm owning my hurt. And I'm feisty one moment because I feel like it. And it's a woman who's owning her experience of life with an open heart and who's filled with compassion for everyone that she relates with. And that is so magnetic and empowering.
Yeah. I
Yes.
think I think my deepest truth is that if you open your heart, you will be met with openness. And if you're met with closure, that's okay too. That doesn't mean that you're wrong for feeling, right? How many of us have chosen to suppress ourselves because we were met with closure? And it's actually self-punishment, right? So, really getting into the mindset of it actually doesn't matter how I'm received. I will not punish myself. I choose to be free.
Oh, yes. Hell yes. It's such a journey, a powerful journey of just, I'm going to just be free. And it's a choice. You're reminding everyone it's a choice. And sovereignty, which I love, you talk about in your work, I talk about in mine. Talk about like, what does this mean for you when you think of sovereignty and partnership and true sacred union? I know you're so passionate about it.
When I think of sovereignty and partnership, I think of choosing to be who you are, independent of the other person's reactions. I think it means being true to yourself, true to your emotions, true to how you feel, without overly analyzing and thinking about, is the other person going to like this? Are they going to be okay with this? Right. And I think some of us that have had the traumatic childhoods, we kind of got trained into hyper fixating on others' emotional responses, right? And then we allow that to start to control how we behave. We have ourself, the other person, and then we have that third judge in our head that is constantly hyper fixating and scanning the environment and asking, okay, if you behave like this, what's going to be the outcome? If you say this, what will be the outcome? I think to be sovereign in a relationship means to be free from that, right? And to have this inner knowing that you're going to be okay no matter what. Even if this lover, this partner, this soulmate of yours chooses to walk out the door tomorrow, you're going to be okay no matter what.
Hell yes. And for me, what also comes is there's a certain level of also faith and trust. This is why I love bringing the faith into my life, is because then that brings this element of like, it's part of the plan. There's a lesson there. There's a learning there. It's not supposed to happen, right? We now we're getting into the whole thing. Another thing, like we also have free will, but it's also this trust in everything in life as medicine and as a lesson. Talk to me, Nevena. I always like to ask this question on the podcast. What does divine union mean to you? What does this work? How does this work tie into when we think about inner union with self, sacred union in relationship, and oneness with the cosmos and all this there is? What does working with the masculine, healing of the masculine, doing this work with sovereignty, how does that relate for you?
So, what divine union means for me is knowing that we are all God's source in a human body, and
Mhm.
that the way that we come together sometimes highlights the separation that has been created. And that separation isn't actually just about us and our personal life. It's this collective separation that's been created that actually first started with the idea that we are separate from God, right? And slowly started to trickle down into society until we started to see ourselves separate from everything, including the masculine, including the feminine, including Mama Earth. And so for me, divine union means the union between the masculine and the feminine, both within and without, the union between our shadow self and our higher self, and the union between Mother Earth and her people.
Mic drop. I'm not going to say anything after that. I'm not even going to say anything after that. So beautifully said. And tell me, Nevena, how can, for everyone listening who's like, wow, I'm loving this conversation so much. This is so valuable. I want to get to know Nevena more and her work. Where can folks find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
I would say Instagram is your best platform. Um,
Okay.
I don't know if you'll share a link, but my Instagram,
Yeah, but still,
yeah,
I'll put it in the show notes.
yeah, my Instagram is just I am Nevena G. That's probably the best place for us to connect.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you so much, Nevena. It's been such an absolute pleasure to have you on the podcast today. And thank you, beautiful people, tuning in to this week's episode of Divine Union. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to seeing you next week. And until then, may all your unions be divine.